Okay, thank you for watching, tuning into, I should say, Stampscaping 101. Here's another test right here using the islands. I wanted to do it in a kind of a nighttime type of scene and test out the looks of these strong silhouettes against kind of a darker composition. And played around with a little bit of pigment ink in here just to kind of tweak the strong solids in here, and I wanted to see how that would look. And I think it looks really good where I always say where dark meets light is a good place to use kind of a pigment ink, application to represent light hitting a certain object. So just a real little minute amount on that really kind of turns that flatness of that design in space, so it looks a little bit more three-dimensional. Okay, and I've used a little bit of pigment ink around up there. This one's the this Grassy hill stamp right here, and I put an object on it like that. But if we didn't have that object on here, this could be 3 miles, 5 miles away. But if you put an object like that on there, in terms of frame of reference, we can assume that that's probably I don't know, 30 yards away from us now, or something like that, little person or horse. And I don't know, quick and easy composition right here in terms of a monotone type of piece, just using some grayscale and some blue tones in here to kind of cool down the temperature a little bit. But mostly just another testing of the designs and testing them out in a different time of day. So anyways, hope you enjoy the video if you choose to watch it, and as always, thanks for tuning into the channel. Okay, let's try another test of these island stamps. I thought I would use this kind of foreground grassy hill. I forgot the name of this stamp right here. I just named them the other day. But this foreground stamp, it could be a background stamp too, but for these islands it would be foreground because these islands are such distant objects. But this, in theory, could be used for snow, for a grassy hill, for a kind of a foreground island, but really not too close if that's the case. It's like, I don't know, a few hundred yards away maybe. Let's start off with another piece of, had a little piece of ink pad on that piece of paper. This is a quarter-page glossy cardstock that I'm working on right here. Okay, now I had a stack of it somewhere. Okay, let's go. I could go vertical with this one. I want a moon in here and this foreground hill. Let's do it like this. Okay. First impression with this image here. Let's see how it looks. Visually, it looks really good in terms of the engraving that they did. So let's see. Yeah, perfect. All those little variations in here are all drawn into the design, to get a little bit of extra texture. I used to just kind of go for everything super smooth, but these days I kind of go for a little bit of added texture throughout, so I kind of condense my dots a little bit heavier in some areas to kind of reflect kind of this notion of kind of variations within the grass. Before I used to make things look really smooth and modeled perfectly. But in nature, you get that kind of variation, from animals or footsteps through the grass, whatever. I don't know. That's just one of those things, I might go back to super smooth, transitions and everything like that. Very modeled. It just depends on kind of what mood I'm in when I'm working on designs. Okay, now this is going to be a quick and easy color scheme here, because I want to just kind of play around with these islands. I was thinking of a moonlight lit type of terrain. Okay, so I'll put the moon up about like so. Okay, and we have enough positions in here for our islands. Okay, and let's do this. Let's create our horizon. And we'll put it about, alright, I mean, you can put it wherever you want, but let's go about something like that. Give enough room, space for a selection of islands. Okay, I'm just folding over a piece of paper like so, alright, and that will be our horizon line right here, okay? So you make this horizon line a little bit darker, and then it transitions up here into the sky. Okay, now when I was talking about a very easy color scheme, I'm referring to kind of just a grayscale exercise. Let's see, I was just going to go with straight black, but let's do add in a little bit of this gray. Here's a London fog gray, which is a memento color. Okay, and you just kind of start on the outer side like that, and see how I'm stroking it down like that? The scene is going to be this way, but this is an awkward way to use this, and you want to use these sponges in a nice ergonomic motion. Okay, so if you go like this, see how easy it is to blend that color in. And I'm using a very light touch, okay? If I want ink to transfer onto the paper in a kind of a darker, more condensed application, I get that with repetitive strokes as opposed to trying to squeeze it on, okay? Which you can kind of do with memento. Memento inks are very thick, but you don't want your tips here to tear, so you want to go with a nice, easy touch, okay? So I'm just touching it on there and just swiping it on. One swipe doesn't give me my full saturation, but I just keep going across it like that, okay? And this way I get these kind of nice streakier types of applications, which will read as kind of a watery surface very nicely. Okay, now, after I've applied it on one side, to keep that nice, well, here, let me put a little bit down here into the this grassy hill. Okay, where do you apply it on the grassy hill? Well, I'm just kind of applying it roughly in the same areas where there is tone within the design, so you're just reiterating the shadows that are inherently rendered into the designs, okay? So this kind of just, I'm strengthening what already exists, like that. See that? Like that? And we have that lit area on those hills still, but tones in here. This looks a little bit more blue than gray right now, because I did have some blue on this tip right here. Okay, so I've turned this around. Okay, I'm coming into it from this side. Okay. Remember, here's my mask, and there's that horizon that's kind of forming right there. See this? I'm just kind of staying in one area, and I'm kind of pulling that ink across. It's through repetition, though. Okay? And then I just move up to my next thing. I'm not going like this. I'm just kind of pulling one line like that across there, and then I get that nice tapered transition. Okay? See, that's kind of giving it that streakier look, and that'll give me my water's surface. Alright, let's add a little bit more to the grassy little hill here, or near hill. I guess it could be sand too. But this scene is going to be fairly dark and monochromatic, so let's Let's go in here. If that moon is going to be a moon, it's probably going to be the light source of a scene, so... So you keep it light, but maybe I don't want it so light, you know, so I'll put a little bit of tone across it with this very light shade of color. London fog. It's probably London fog at its, you know, its full saturation is only, well, like a 20% gray or something like that. Very light in terms of grayscale or value. Okay, so that is pretty much it as far as that London fog goes. It established my kind of lighting scheme. You know, I'm going to have this surface of the water lit, you know, some little areas of the hill a little bit lit. I'll keep some of the clouds a little bit lighter around it, but I have put on a pretty decent, you know, amount of London fog so far. But now let's move on to our next tone. Going with the grayscale. I'll just go in straight with black. I'll use a Marvy black, use whatever black you have. Marvy black is pretty good. It's one of those blacks that are, you know, 100% black in terms of the value range of it, but when I'm applying it over the top of another color, such as the Memento, I don't get a full saturation of black right there. It's very much lighter because that ink is not transferring from the sponge as fast, okay? But it will get fairly dark if I just stay with it, you know, and, you know, apply multiple coats. But we don't want things to get so dark, you know. We don't want this to be like some kind of real spontaneous type of motion or application, I should say, of the color. We want things to kind of blend in really nicely. This is glossy cardstock that I'm working on, but you can do this on other types of cardstock. I was working on some metallic papers with this ink. I'll go on with some matte papers. Matte papers, you know, if you want a glossy look, you'll have to use glossy paper, or you can use a matte paper and really spray it, you know, with a spray sealant at the end, like a Krylon Crystal Clear. But it's going to be a little bit of a different experience depending on what paper you're working with. The metallic papers are a lot more resistant to the ink, so the ink transfer, coloring, toning of your scene goes quite a bit slower than, say, something like a glossy cardstock. And glossy cardstock would be a little bit slower in terms of the buildup of ink, because it is a little bit more sealed off than, say, a matte paper, you know, which is going to be a little bit more absorbent. There are, you know, coated matte papers too. So there's all kinds of different colors, you know, papers too, and ink combinations. You know, some Marvies right here that I'm working on with, or this black one, the viscosity is such that it's thinner than other brands of inks usually. So it gets darker a little bit faster. If I was using a Memento black or something like that, these inks are a little bit thicker, so the inks that don't kind of get dark too fast, sometimes they're easier to control, but sometimes you have to apply a little bit more of them for them to transfer to the paper. So just use them, experiment with the different papers you're using. Okay, so we have something like that. Now, just to get a little bit of a thinner streak, let's see, I kind of stay in one area like this, and I kind of carry that out a little bit more. The paper's kind of drying really fast, so I might want to put another coating with the Memento or something like that. Okay, let's get that moon to stand out a little bit more here. So what I'm doing is I am making the area around the moon a little bit darker. The darker you make certain areas of your scene, the lighter the light areas are going to seem by contrast. tap to get a little bit more ink buildup in whatever your areas you want that to be in. My horizon is kind of disappearing a little bit because the transition of the contrast between the horizon and the sky is not very great, so I want to create a stronger transition between land and sky, so I'm going to add a little bit more tone here. This is called a color box stylus tool that I'm working with, and it's a pretty comfortable tool to work with. You can find them on our website, and you can find the information for Stampscapes below in the notes section. Just click on the Show More underneath any video to get the full details of any given scene that is being worked on these videos. So you can kind of see that coming around, see that stronger horizon line now. Okay, now let's add a little bit more here. Sometimes I like to do the four corners a little bit darker just to kind of frame the composition off a little bit more. Now we have that open space. I mean, that looks fine as is. You can put whatever you want in there, sailboat or whale coming out of the water, whatever. But I'm going to add in some additional island forms. Make kind of a nice little bay type of situation composition. Just different sizes to work with. Whenever I see kind of a scene like this, you know, driving along the coast at night or something, it always makes me daydream a little bit, or night dream, I don't know, dream, a waking dream, thinking about how nice it would be to be out there on a sailboat or something like that, you know, in open water like that. Underneath the moonlight. Okay, I can use that same one over here, maybe. Yeah. These are fun to work with. I'll go with a little bit of a larger one. Play around with a little bit of perspective. I'm sticking my unmatted stamp to the block that has utilizing tack and peel for that temporary mounting method of temporary mounting method of unmounted rubber only stamps. Okay, look at that. Okay, pause briefly. I'm going to put something on top of this little hill, I think. Or do I want to? Yeah, I think I will. Okay, I'm thinking about this horseback right here. California off of Los Angeles. Believe it or not, there's a series of islands called Catalina, and they do like ranching out there, of all things. Minor, I don't know how much they're doing these days, but Maybe this is reminiscent of that type of idea. Okay, now this could have been a hill that was, 2 miles away, but if you put this character on it, of course, it brings something much closer. Now it's, 20 yards away from you. Just a frame of reference, objects like that gives a frame of reference in terms of how far something is from us, distance-wise. They say that there was this kind of a joke, or I don't know, this thing that about landscape photographers. What you do is you put someone in the scene somewhere in color photography that's wearing like a red jacket or something like that, and that would give kind of a frame of reference, to the scale and distance, everything like that, and have someone in kind of red, and it kind of stands out really nicely. Okay, now I'm kind of anchoring these. I think these islands look pretty good as is, but I'm just giving them a little bit more of a shadow. Kind of anchors them down even though they are solid, so I'm just kind of adding some shadows into that water right there. See that shadow right there, how effective it is for that moonlight? So what I'm doing is I'm kind of taking my stylus tool and the very small, thin edge like that, I'm just kind of streaking this into the stamp design, but also into the water a little bit, so kind of going over the water and island, and that's giving me that little bit of a shadow in here, down in here, and then I'll do it on this one right here. So I'll I can see it like this, see, coming in from this way. And then when I flip it around, I'll use the other side, like that. Okay. Strengthening the shadows slightly. Okay, now, just to kind of liven this up a little bit, I mean, it's grayscale, but let's add in a little bit of a touch of some color. Why don't we go with a cool tone on this one? I've been using kind of warmer tones for sunsets in the past couple scenes, testing out these stamps. And let's go with a Memento Summer Sky, just to give it a cool touch, okay? A tinge of temperature. In this case, it's going to be cool, a cool tone. I think my Memento Blue is Summer Sky is getting fairly dry at this point in time. Might be time for a new one, or, well, re-inker. I don't have re-inkers for any mementos, but I need to get some. And let me use a little bit of this. I have some re-inker for my aqua. Very, very pale color. I used a little bit more than I probably need, but Every time I'm doing kind of a moonlit scene, I mean, you can do scenes, you know, stamp scenes any color you want, but you know, the moonlight, you know, when you go outside in the moonlight, you know, colors don't read anymore. They're kind of under that a different colored light with the moon typically, and you know, colors kind of fade away and get zapped. This song by this band, the Moody Blues, that always comes to mind. It's kind of this poetry being read during a song. I forgot the name of the song, but I always think about that when I'm doing these moonlit scenes. Okay, I've laid down that blue in there. It has that kind of tinge, you know, like that. Now, let's go back in. I'm going to add a little bit more of this black into it. Just to kind of give a little bit of variation. I like to go back and forth. It's not like use one color, then you move on to the next color and next color, and you know, never to return to a certain tone. I kind of go back and forth depending on what the scene looks like it could use. A little bit more of one thing or another. Okay, so look at that bay there. It's kind of fun. Okay, let's try a little bit of a white gel pen. Trying to think if I need it or want it. I can kind of bring in some additional tone into this horse, you know, kind of coloring the shadows a similar color to the colors that were just tinted into the scene. This one's azure blue. You come down here in the shadows a little bit more. It's a very light blue. So it just kind of blends and it gives you... This is an alcohol pen, so it's not mixing with the colors that I've already laid down. You can hit it down here in the shadows too, a little bit more. You know, some very specific little areas. Something like that. Kind of reiterate the shadows around the moon too with this. You can use different colors of blue, and then use your blending pen, you know, to blend in some more colors. Yeah, actually, pretty good. A little bit of extra tinge on the horizon to separate the horizon from, you know, land from sky. Okay, let's see if I can kind of enhance the scene slightly with a little bit more of a this white gel pen. Okay, I left some areas light down here, and light that is brighter than white in photography is called specular light. And it's that little kind of shiny, you know, little reflective little areas within a given space or objects. And that adds that nice little touch onto something. It's those little details that are really fun to do too. But it can really bring a scene to life. It could bring a scene to life in a very subtle way or a very obvious way too, so depends how many you use, where you use it, how much contrast there is around it. White on light really doesn't show up too much, but if you use this on a very dark area, it'll really stand out. And let's see if I can get it to zoom in here a little bit. See those little dots down here? Right down here on the water surface. Gives it kind of that shimmery, extra shimmery look, I should say. Okay, let's come down here. maybe on this little ridge, you know, where it's a little bit lighter. So I reiterated the shadows with a little bit more of a darker tone, you know, darker tones, and you can reiterate your highlight, your lit areas with the opposite, which would be white or something lighter. There's different types of gel pens out there. Some sets have, you know, many variations of a given hue. So if an area gets fairly dark out here, maybe I don't want a white, but maybe I'd want like a gray gel pen or something like that. Alright, that moon looks okay, but let's play around with something too. Let's take it to the next level. Let's take some white, frost white color box pigment ink, okay, on a cotton swab. If you haven't done this before, if you try it, you're going to use way too much ink. We all do. I do it too, sometimes. This pad of mine is very, very dry. It's almost unusable. This one is fairly wet, so it's like the extreme opposite spectrum. But see on here, on my very dry one, you can see where there's indentations in here. This is such an old pad. But I can just go straight, you know, with this my cotton swab right into here and smash it down and not get too much ink. But on this one right here, if I just barely touch it, there's way too much ink on there. So you have to kind of, after ink up, kind of dab off a little bit. From this one I don't need to, but, and I'm just going to dab it into my, around my moon and make that kind of the moon look like it's glowing a little bit more by softening the edges around it, okay? But like I said, you're going to have to take a lot of ink off to where it's barely being applied on the scene, and you have to get kind of anything visible in terms of a change through repetitive tapping, okay? That's going to give you a lot of control over it, but I know how it goes, you know, people put some on there and then they go like that. Nothing's showing, so they ink it up and they go like that, and it's a gigantic blob. Luckily, pigment ink will just wipe right off of that, though, so if you use too much, just wipe it off with your finger. Okay, let's go with a little bit of this wetter one. See, there's so much ink on here, it just kind of blobs right off. And then take it on there. So, start in your lighter areas and work out into the darker areas and transition that amount of coverage or application of that ink. This is where kind of a pigment ink like this, it softens up your impressions, okay? And it's kind of the thing that can lend kind of this different emotional quality to a scene like this. It gives it that dreaminess, okay? So I'd really recommend kind of playing around with this type of look right here. It can extend the visual textural range, that's what I'm looking for, of a scene, okay? It's all the same texture on here, but visually, this area around my moon looks a little bit softer now because I've added that pigment ink in here, okay? Now let's take a look at some of these, like this island down here that's closer to this water, okay? Like the light. The lit water, I should say. Okay, let me go over that a little bit. And what I'm doing is I'm knocking down that value by making it lighter in the lighter areas, okay? So see what that did is it transitioned that dark little point there into something lighter. So what you have is this moonlight affecting the lit areas of your objects, okay? And that's where you kind of really push this kind of dreaminess of a scene, okay? And it's very easy to do. It's an easy trick. Watch this right here, okay? On this island right here, okay? I have this set on here where it's kind of dry, so it's like a dry application of it, and where it exists in this lighter area where dark meets light. Watch this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's 20 taps of it right there, so it's probably about 30 taps or so, something like that. But it really took me about 10 seconds to do, but let's see. You can see at the top of that where I've applied some of that ink. Now when you look at it at a distance here, you know, there's this kind of different texture. It's a different consistency. It's softer, but it's lit though too. See how it's kind of capturing that light? So what you have is this idea that this light is in there. It's like a three-dimensional thing surrounding your objects in there. It's like mist, and it's being illuminated. So suddenly, you've given this kind of tactile type of feel. Let me put some at the base of this horse. Let's say that there's a little bit of fog or something like that in here. So it's light, so you're illuminating that light in here. And there's your kind of dreamy quality. And once you get this kind of right, you can do it, you know, you can apply that over the entire scene without having to re-ink, okay? You just keep using the same one because you're kind of applying this very dry application. And see that? It's illuminating your clouds and your vapor in those clouds. You're saying that there's suspended particles. So suddenly you're enveloped, you know, things are being enveloped in here. And that's kind of the kinesthetic type of quality that you're adding to a scene. So things that aren't just visual, you're giving this kind of a illusion of a kinesthetics, you know, things that are suspended in the air. And it's just a simple trick of just a very dry brushed application of pigment ink, okay? But you can see where that changes kind of the spirit of certain areas in here, and thus the overall. So just a little bit here, 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 because it's right next to this light. It's where dark meets light. There's areas around here that define that moon, but I've just kind of softened it a little bit. And here's a little bit down here. And that's kind of doing light in a very, very, you're defining light in a very, I don't know, it's a very easy, it's a very simplistic method, but I think it's very effective. Now again, if people start doing this, what they are doing is they're applying way too much ink, you know. If people have a hard time, watch this, I've just used a thick layer of that, they go like this. You know, it's all kind of, you know, it's all blobbed into the scene, but it's also the most forgiving. It's completely gone, right? But that's where it is. So you have to really take off a lot more ink. If you haven't done this before, take off a lot more to where you think it's practically invisible, okay? If you tap it on there like 10 times and you can't see a thing, well, then you've taken off too much. But you almost want there to have to be about 10 taps before you can start seeing anything, okay? And then I remove, you know, if I put down too much, I can just kind of tap it off with my finger and it comes off of my finger. It's like a eraser, you know. But, you know, when you first start doing that, you're really probably removing more ink than you end up applying or leaving on the scene. But I have videos on this too, just on you know, the pigment ink applications, but that's the gist of it there. You know, if you don't put too much on your tips right here, use real Q-tips too, that are cotton, or just use cotton swabs, not the acrylic ones, okay? But anyways, there's a quick and easy scene right there. Came about fairly fast, but look at this transition of islands. That one's the same as that one, so we have, I don't know, in this set right here, I have, you know, so many different sizes and shapes, you know, more than you'll ever need. That will never need, I think. I don't have a huge one or something like that, but You know, one's going back in the distance like that, so just a quick and easy one. I wanted to see it in the moonlight as, you know, in addition to like, you know, more of the sunset-y types of things. So this one's the first one where I've kind of grounded it in, you know, with an object like that, you know, in terms of frame of reference. Well, I guess this one's a frame of reference too, in terms of these trees right here, but we really know what size this foreground object is with the use of the figure in there. So you'd have like grazing sheep or cattle or something like that on here too. That would be fun. Anyways, hope you enjoyed it. Another little test here at the islands. I like what I see. I like the details on this one right here. First time I've stamped that one, first impression. And just kind of fun with, you know, kind of the night objects, but I really like to kind of bend them a little bit in terms of the lighting, and just a couple little areas right here. This one's really minute in terms of my application of that, but look at that. You know, it's a fairly flat object, you know, in terms of that silhouette of an island, but you've turned it now, and you're saying that it's dimensional. You're saying that light is hitting it, and it's not just a flat object like that. So, all right, thanks for watching.